Hey, folks.
Hey. So maybe let's start with a short introduction. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Mantas Davidavičius. I'm a philosopher, or so they say on the list.
Hi, my name is Audronė Žukauskaitė.
Hi, hello, my name is Jūratė Tutlytė. I work at Vytautas Magnus University and partly responsible for this CoHappiness Congress. Sorry for that.
All right, so thank you very much. And my proposal was to start with a Q&A session to you, if you're not opposed to that. So any questions based on the lecture to Professor Morton?
Is it on? Okay, so I have one question.
Oops, you froze.
I'm frozen?
No longer frozen.
All right, so you have talked quite a lot about this distance between mind and body, and how we should diminish it, get in touch with our this buzzing mesh you mentioned in your books and Strange Stranger, and my question is about politics. You have mentioned politics. How do you envision it? What does it mean to be political if we land down to earth? Thank you.
Is that Gediminas behind you? Hey, man. This guy is why I came to Kaunas in the first place. We went to the zoo and everything. It was brilliant. Hey, I recognize that hairdo anywhere. It's really nice to see you again.
Fantastic.
Really nice. Politics. So politics and aesthetics are the same thing, right? They can be moral and they can be amoral, right? But they're both to do with connecting things, right? Like, I'm going to get this group and I'm going to get this group and I'm going to put them together. I'm going to get this canvas and I'm going to get this red and I'm going to put it next to this blue on this canvas, right? And so in the end, all decisions that are kind of moral, ethical decisions are fundamentally, profoundly political decisions. I was having a conversation with Slavoj Žižek about this, and this was the issue that he was having with object-oriented ontology, funnily enough. He was like, well, if everything exists in the same way, does that mean that everything has the same right to exist? Right, which is the kind of normal freak out question that people have. I was like, oh, that's your problem. Okay, I can talk about that because, I would rather the AIDS patient exist than the AIDS virus exists. That's my decision, right? The OOO means you're free to make a decision, and the decision is always in the kind of void, right? Like an aesthetic decision. Yeah. So there's some kind of just pure decision in the void quality to who you affiliate with. And of course, I've been talking about this in the other way around, that all the time we find ourselves affiliated with things that we didn't choose. Like, I didn't choose my parents. That's why I'm in therapy. It's why everyone's in therapy, right? Like, my poor kids didn't get to choose me to be their parent, And so, yeah, politics, everything is political, right? So like, it's a political act to pick this up and take a sip of water. Right? And ecological politics just means realizing that the politics is much bigger than just human beings relating to each other. It's human beings relating to primates and clouds and global warming and all that stuff, right? And so, yeah, for me, what I'm trying to do is create a different kind of politics. And, again, I think in particular, I would like to make the idea of action a little bit softer and the idea of passive a little bit sharper, right? So they kind of slightly would meet in the middle, you know, so that there isn't this difference between, you know, I am the Lenin deciding guy. I'm deciding that the revolution will be now because I have the conch and it's the event, you know, like this Badiou Zizek thing where there's this very masculine idea that true events are like cutting into some continuum. What we're really talking about here is all these other people are just basically droids. They're just basically like feminized droids functioning in some kind of servile way, but truly then the leader acts, right? Whereas animals behave, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I think that's this very toxic concept. And I think all revolutions so far have failed because they've not included non-human beings, not just because we do need to give little Che Guevara hats to hedgehogs. We do, because it would look super cute for a start if we involve them in that kind of stuff, but also because the very idea of action needs to be less anthropocentric, right? The very idea of acting shouldn't be doing something different from what non-human beings do and some human beings who have been subjugated do, right? That's the issue. We need to redefine what action could be. And so in the end, you know, this kind of distinction a lot of people on the left make between incrementalism and revolution is maybe a bit of a problem, you know. And I talked to some of my friends, mostly Hegelian. I'm sorry if anyone's a Hegelian in here, and I love Slavoj, you know, and I wrote this book with Dominic Boyer, and he's a Hegelian. I'm fine with Hegelian, right? And I love the little bits of Hegel. I could do without the teleological imperialism justification bit, you know. But like a lot of those people have an issue with you know, act versus not act, you know. And they said to me, Obama should have tried national health care and failed. That would have been better because it's more noble than incrementally improving people's healthcare with Obamacare. And it's like, wow, so ordinary people are now collateral damage in your revolution project. I hate you, you know, not you. I'm talking to some invisible Hegelian guy, you know. And so I think, you know, like, and very obviously for me, coming from a country where there is national health, Americans didn't even know they could care about their bodies in that way. And then Obamacare showed up and said, oh my God, I have a right to have my body cared for. My car has to be cared for. What about my body? You know? So suddenly Americans realizing that. So then the space opens up for national health. And you know what? Even Slavoj said that. You know, you can find it on a video. He doesn't say it out loud in public, but he did say that actually. He said, you know, he supports the Obamacare for that reason, you know. And so again, you know, like another thing that's the problem with a lot of political beliefs is that they are very religious, right? And they involve some idea of apocalypse, right? This idea of event is very apocalyptic, you know. And how do you get to there from here, right? That's the religion problem. How can I be a good person when I'm actually evil? You know, that's the whole problem. And it's like the double bind that kind of gets you involved in this religion thing that you have to do all over and over and over again because it never really works to solve the basic problem, which is the split in post-agricultural society between human beings and non-human beings. So yeah, like I don't know, improving people's happiness might be the wrong thing, but you know, like increasing pleasure would be good, right? And realizing that, you know, I want more pleasure. I'm that kind of person. You know, what's wrong with our world today? It's not enough pleasure, you know, because I want to have dolphin pleasure, bacteria pleasure, lots of human being pleasure, not just white guy pleasure, right? Like we need an increase, as William Blake would say, an increase in sensual enjoyment is how we're going to bring about whatever's next.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone like to elaborate or ask another question? Yeah, sure.
So I would like to refer to your book, Humankind, Solidarity with Non-Human People. And you somehow prefer the concept of solidarity, redefining our relationship with non-humans. So why solidarity? For me, that sounds a little bit maybe too anthropocentric and too egalitarian, maybe.
For real, doesn't it though? Yeah, like, so if you, but if you look it up in the dictionary, like, so I used to work for the Oxford English Dictionary, so I did a lot of research for them, and I came to realize how great that thing is, you know, because it lists all the uses of a word, and some of these uses are kind of ambiguous and they contradict. And quite often when we hear the word solidarity, we're thinking of a choice, right? Like, I'm going to choose to affiliate with these beings. Right, but also solidarity is a feeling. That's the bit that no one talks about enough. Solidarity is a state. That's how they describe it in the dictionary. It's a feel, right? It's the feel, or if you want to use the sophisticated language, it's the phenomenology of being connected to other beings, and this necessarily includes non-human beings. Yeah, necessarily, right? Because even just relating to myself, I'm relating to my brain, you know, my brain is a evolution product. There's lots of different aspects that have evolved at different times, right? I've got these little pointy bits in my ears because in the many millions of years ago, we came from these creatures that had the pointy ears, and they kind of folded into this. Yeah. So even relating to yourself and other human beings is also about like you're relating to also not human beings at the same time. And solidarity you need to have in order to have beauty, in order to have coexistence, in order to have reproduction. There has to be some connection already, right? It doesn't have to be a physical connection. You know, so I was teaching this class yesterday and I said, look, everybody imagine the most beautiful work of art they've ever seen in their life. And I'm like, okay, good. You just connected to something that isn't in the room. You know, still you were affected by something, but without being touched by it, you were touched by it in a different way. You were moved by it in a different way. In a way like telekinesis, you know, in a way like you were affected at a distance, like Einstein's spooky action at a distance. That's solidarity. It doesn't necessarily mean you're mechanically touching. It means that you're effectively affiliated with, right? Like, and that doesn't require tape measure close, right? Like everybody visualize now, in the middle of the Milky Way, there's a black hole called Sagittarius A. Yeah, supermassive black hole. So right now, this black hole, Sagittarius A, is closer in the real sense than your glasses or your toenails, right? Because you visualized it, right? Okay, so with a tape measure, it's billions of miles away, but phenomenologically, it's very close. That's the solidarity I'm talking about, this phenomenological solidarity. It doesn't have to do with physical tape measure proximity, but to do with a feeling of affiliation. And you find this in many cultures, right? We talk about ancestors, you know, people are connected to beings that aren't alive. You know, we talk about, you know, there's the fish people, they're connected to, they have some solidarity with fish. They don't eat fish, they venerate the fish. Then there's the otter people next door, and they do the same thing with the otter, right? So they find themselves connected insofar as they're not going to manipulate, they're not going to kill and eat the fish or the otter, right? So original, like logically originally, not chronologically, but logically originally, there is this interlock, right, between you and at least one other being, even if that other being is just your finger, right? And so that's the thing, that's why to care, right? Like this is the basis of how you can have like art and politics and that. So that's what I mean by solidarity. It's I love this question, because when you hear the word, always you do hear some kind of human-centered decision, right? But I'm saying, how can you even do that? How can you even decide I'm going to affiliate with these beings? Because you're already connected to these other humans in some way, right? So my one, which is the feeling, the supposedly passive one, is actually primordial one, you know, and the other one is like it's sitting on top of it.
Okay, thank you very much. So there is one more person joining us, curator and photographer Alex Zakletsky. So he's on Zoom. So do we have any more questions to Professor Morton? Sure.
Thank you, Professor, for a cheerful lecture, I should say. I really enjoy all the time you being so open and including that feelings of yours and being so honest about them. And this is my question, that I decided to go from this feeling phase or space of my own, and listening to the prescription that we need to be cheerful or happy without no reason. I would reflect myself that it's a weird thing to feel, that being in the Congress of Happiness, but this is a kind of a comfy feeling on the back, even talking about that. I don't know, this is a feeling. And also the portion of sadness, and I was just discovered why, and my question is related to that. I wonder, in the prescription of being happy or even cheerful, even with the embracing this unhappiness or dying, yes, would that work in the condition of war? I'm sorry to say that, because it seems that we, or personally me, I was landed on Earth when the war in Ukraine started. And it's just gonna disappear. And it's very easy to talk about many things, but can you reflect on that? Thank you so much.
Please, I would love to. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this. And, this has been an issue for all my Lithuanian friends since I met Lithuanian people in 2014. Everyone's been freaking about what Putin could do in a way that only sometimes the other people like America catches up to this worry, which is very genuine and real. It's a deeply frightening, terrible situation, not unlike the frightening, terrible, genuine, like planet scale war that human beings are doing, like mostly white guy human beings, mostly American white guy. It's mostly my fault, right? I'm sort of talking about guilt here, The cool thing about guilt, of course, is that it means you're not a psychopath. There's a special kind of being who doesn't have any anxiety or guilt or shame. It's called a psychopath, right? So happy, cheerful should include like guilty and shame and worried and freaked out, really, and it shouldn't like exclude that, And if we're talking about like being happy rather than being unhappy, then it does become very difficult to think things like war, The first way you can know to escape from prison is to know that you are in prison, right? The first step of being free is knowing that you have been enslaved. Yeah, the first step of creating a more ecologically just world for every life form is realizing that it isn't one right now, right? And so I think that's where I'd like to land in my answer, right? There's no way to make this into a nice thing. This is a terrible, terrible thing, and everyone's blaming everybody except for the big thing. Like Slavoj was saying last week, we were having this chat on Zoom, and he was like, Americans are all like, oh, it's our fault, No one wants to say, well, this big country invaded another country, which is really bad, It's very important to hold on to that. My grandfather was a communist. He fought in the Second World War. He was one of the first people to go into Berlin when it was liberate Berlin, and he saw the things that also the British had done, right? The carpet bombing of Berlin, it's a terrifying amount of killing they had done, for no good reason, actually. And so this is a very profound and difficult question. There's no way to turn, shit into chocolate mousse, right? Disgusting, horrible things are disgusting and horrible. Yeah. But the paradox is that disgusting and pleasure are not opposite, right? disgusting is when there's not enough pleasure or there's too much pleasure, right? There is a continuum, unfortunately, which is how war and murdering and all those things can happen, because there's a continuum between things that are more or less violent, you know. Am I saying anything good?
Oh, you sound unhappy, and everybody here, so I think we should switch on.
Right. So thanks again for your answer. Yeah, Alex, go on.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you all, especially you, Timothy. I have mentioned a couple of your conceptions in a lecture I read yesterday through the Zoom. Alas, because of war, I have to stay in Ukraine. I'm involved in our armed forces to protect Ukraine. So, despite the fact that I signed it as a photographer and curator, which I've really been, it's true. But firstly of all, I'm graduated as a Master of Science in Ecology and Environmental Policy. How it can be? Well, it's normal for Ukraine. Believe me, it's Ukraine are very flexible. So my area of interest is underwater habitats of Black Sea and of the sea shelf of East Crimea. And after Crimea was occupied by Russians, I can't work by my specialization, as you understand. And I'm simultaneously working as a journalist from 2000. And my first essay was dedicated to Chernobyl, but not about Chernobyl as a human catastrophe, but as a phenomenon that followed after that. I mean, the rocket jump of natural resurrection and increasing of biodiversity. So, what I wanted to say about the solidarity with live beings at all. When full-scale invasion of Russians began in Ukraine, a lot of our people, first of all, activists, evacuate not only humans, not only women and childs and old ones, but also animals and even some vegetables. Really, I have a friends who takes some not the vegetables, some plants. Sorry, not vegetables. I meant some plants which are growing in apartments, in houses, and taken from the shelling. And what I have to say that if we speaking about a real life, a real world where some ecological imperative will be, it can be only the society of democracy, because the most awful environmental catastrophe was organized or took a place on the states which are totalitarian. I mean, first of all, Russian Federation, of course, Soviet Union, and China. For example, we can take Chernobyl catastrophe. Yeah, we can take even coronavirus, COVID-19 disease. It's all the product of total regime, of the total control regimes. And nowadays, when we have problems with problems, you understand, with Russians, It's not only the problems with people who killed, but also it's awful problems with environment and with environmental terrorism as it is. You know that Russians captured two nuclear power plants on the Ukrainian territory. It is we are very lucky that one of them was liberated. I mean, Chernobyl nuclear power plant, but another one is still under the occupation. And I saw it by my own eyes that Russians provoke ecological catastrophe on Ukrainian territory. So my point that we will might be the ecologically friendly only in a society where no totalitarianism and no such awful problem as a real politic. Because, for example, when we spoke about Rio de Janeiro conference of 1992 and with the convention, the big countries and the totalitarian countries give a fuck to it. That is why Rio de Janeiro does not work at all for today. So that is my point. Thank you.
Wow, I couldn't say it better. I would only say it worse. Thank you for saying everything that you just said. I mean, I come from a war zone called the USA, right? Everyone in the USA has PTSD from slavery, and slavery is still happening, not just abstractly, right? I mean, obviously there is enslavement of people, but there are also structures like the Electoral College, which are artifacts of slavery that everyone has to suffer through. And, you know, everything in America is tinged with this slavery legacy, you know, because America is the Xinjiang of Europe, right? Like, it's where mostly England outsourced all the slavery to in order to accumulate the huge amount of money so they could automate it, you know. And so the aggression and the violence here is so off the scale. You know, my daughter's about to go to Berlin to work a little bit, and she's a bit scared, you know, because she's 18. And I'm like, well, actually, you're going to be going to a very calm place compared to this place where everything is uncertain. No one knows anything and everything's unclear. And there's no tax. There's no income tax in my state. There's no money to pay for the roads. So all the roads are damaged. I went to visit my friend in Beirut. My friend was driving me from the airport. And she said, I'm really sorry about the roads here. And I said, actually, and I was telling the truth, the roads in Houston are much worse than the roads in Beirut, right? And the roads in Beirut are like that because people like me gave Lebanese people all these bullets to kill each other with for years in the Civil War, you know, but America does this to its own people just by having oil refineries and guns, you know, and so it's a terrifying situation, even, you know, even without the possibility that you could be bombed, you know. And the paradox is that most Americans don't even know what that's like, right? 9/11 was maybe like 1 hour of Ukraine conflict problem, you know, like 1 hour of the Blitz of London, you know, 3,000 people got killed. And there was this huge fascist overreaction to it, of course, in America, 9/11, you know. Americans don't know, but then but the paradox is, of course, they're doing it to themselves and each other and other countries all the time. It's such a violent, warlike place. I'm sure Gediminas would agree with me, and I'm sure he's glad not to be in Massachusetts right now, even though there's all kinds of difficulties everywhere around the world. It's frightening how we treat each other like cattle over here, unless we are billionaire, you know. And so that's how I relate to it. And I think that in the end, you know, if we're going to enter a more ecologically just age, there needs to be decades, maybe forever, truth and reconciliation process for about 1,000 different things, including what's happening right now, where you are. And definitely in terms of talking about slavery in America, because everyone suffers from this still. It's still happening. And yeah, I think, you know, a society where everyone was grieving more directly for all of the horror that they are part of and that they underwent is much more peaceful in a way. You know, no one has any time in Burkina Faso to take over the world because they're all so busy doing grief rituals. I met the shaman from Burkina Faso called Sabanfu Some, and she told me that, you know, like, you get married, grief ritual. You know, you go out to the restaurant, grief ritual. You know, you kill a goat, grief ritual. You eat the goat, grief ritual. Everything, right? There's no time to think about taking over the universe anymore because you're so involved processing the grief. And I only just figured out how to process my own grief, you know. And the way I see it, grief is your past trying to give your future a massage. Right, the grief is everything about you that you can't control. It's your soul, you know, not just your idea of you, but everything. The Gesamtkunst you know, and it's saying to you, hey, look, this is going to sound really weird, but like, lie down in the fetal position, and I'm going to massage your abs, and you're going to feel like you're going to throw up, and you're going to cry. And then I'm going to leave, and you can't say when, and then maybe I'll come back soon, but you can't tell me when I'll come back. And I think, you know, if we could just allow the past to give the future a massage like that, then the future could be different. So funnily enough, you know, like, confronting the grief is a way to allow the future to be different. That's all I want to add to what you said, because I have no way to add anything better than that.
All right, thank you very much. So I would maybe like to get back a little bit to the topic of our conference, which is happiness, though you criticized this notion in your talk/lecture. So let's use maybe cheerfulness instead. But anyways, I would like to ask like everybody, our participants too, obviously, why, when we think of happiness or cheerfulness, why does it necessarily have to be past anthropocentric? So whoever feels like to answer my question, just go for it. Or maybe you would disagree, maybe it has to be anthropocentric.
So maybe I will proceed with that question of solidarity, which is now
sure.
explained in terms of feeling, as I understood. And I just somehow remembered the concept by psychotherapist Antonio Damasio, and one of his books has the title "The Feeling of What Happens." And this feeling is something which is characteristic not only to human bodies, but to any body. A molecule can feel what happens, and also a human can feel its hair of his body and have this feeling, you know, am I okay? Yes, I'm fine. And this maybe, this is happiness, that feeling which we can maybe also interpret in terms of perception or cognition or sensation. Maybe there are other terms as well.
So basically, as far as I understand, this is a feeling that is commonly shared not only by human beings, but also by non-human beings,
by
right?
bacteria, for example.
Okay.
So.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I was wondering about the subject of who is feeling this cheerfulness? Like, can we say that that this subject, may be it a human being or a bacteria or something else, is it just a pattern in a chaos? Has it some substantiality behind it? Is it a thing? It's more of a question to Professor. Maybe you could elaborate on that.
I am not a scientist. I go along with what science says is real. I'm an ontology guy, right? So ontology means the studying how things exist, right? So maybe there's just one thing, maybe the universe is one big thing and we're all just like holographic projections of this one big thing. But how does this one big thing exist? Does it go on like this? Or does it exist like this? You know, does it exist like that? You know, and so that's the ontology. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know how. I don't know if I can tell you there is a thing called happiness. The trouble with the conversation is that it could turn into a conversation about a label in a record store. Not you, but like when people hear the word, it could become like heavy metal. You know, and people say, oh, well, we know what heavy metal is, but do we really know? I mean, there's all sorts of different types. And is it to do with the hairdo or the music or the way the bands are, or is it just a label that we put on certain kinds of music arbitrarily, you know? And one always has to deal with this fact, right? That meaning is like coming out as some kind of creepy, slightly off-kilter relationship to the funny sounds that we make and the squiggles that we make on the page, right? And so, yeah, that I would definitely like to say happiness is great. You know, that this is a great title for a conference, and like the 50 DPI JPEG is happiness is very important, right? Up to 3000 DPI, maybe you get into some other details, like you could allow suffering a little bit and compassion, and you could allow the sense of fragility, but the 50 DPI, that's good enough for me. Happy is better than unhappy, definitely. It's just like the higher resolution you get, the more ambiguity you get, right? Because in a funny way, ambiguity, which is what you're really talking about, I think, is that the ambiguity of what we're talking about. Ambiguity is a signal of accuracy, right? Like who goes to see the optometrist? You know, sometimes I go to see the eye doctor, and always they put this thing on your face and they're like, number 1 or number 2, number 1 or number 2. And gradually the lenses gets more and more precise and you see more and more the letters on the wall. And it gets down to this point where it's like number 1 or number 2. Like, I don't know anymore. I don't know. This one's a bit crappy and this one's a bit crappy. And I can't decide because my time is crappy and doctors are crappy and lens grinding is crappy and glass is crap. Everything is finite. Like instead of using crappy, let's talk about finitude, right? And so what does it mean when you have an ambiguity there? Either prescription could be good, right? That's very, you have a distinct, sharp choice between two equally slightly bad solutions. What does it mean? It means you have an accurate prescription, yeah, whichever one you choose. And so for me, ambiguity is a symptom of accuracy, right? So the more you think about something, the more ambiguous it gets, and it means you're getting more DPI resolution, you know? Like in Buddhism, it's like there's samsara, which is being a confused, messed up sentient being, and there's nirvana, which is being a totally enlightened Buddha. Yeah, that's the 50 DPI. Then you get to 3000 DPI, and it's like, well, actually, kind of they have to be the same. Otherwise, how could you get from there to there? You know, and there's this funny little, you know, small print, you know?
All right, thank you very much. So would anyone like to add something? No. All right, so let's maybe move on to a different question, which is not really a question, but maybe more of a I know, different way of trying to imagine the world we live in. So I was thinking about different artistic, philosophical, political, or whichever attempts that help us imagine a world we live in a different way, or just maybe change our imagination about the world itself. Maybe the world remains the same, but the way we think about the world has changed. So yeah. Do we have any maybe examples or maybe some good instances of such practices come to mind? So again, whoever feels like answering, just go for it. I mean, as philosophers or artists, or I mean, if there are politicians among us, whatever. No idea.
But you know, I can speak to the fact that I'm a big fan of the brain these days. I'm on the side of the brain, not of the mind. You know, there's my idea of me, right? And there's actual me, you know, which is my brain. And clearly my brain has been etched with many, many habitual patterns into these little grooves, you know, and because I'm intelligent, so they say, I have a special kind of stupidity, right? Which is that I have really good reasons to be stupid, like footnotes as to why I never need to change my mind or do anything different. And right. And so I've actually been working quite hard on just doing different things for no good reason at all. And that's actually been, so for example, I'm terrified of heights, you know, so I say to myself all the time, so this year I made myself go to the fairground. I made myself do a thing that in Houston is called drop zone. You know, this thing, you get in this cage and it lifts you up like maybe 100 meters and then it just drops you, you know, and you just fall to the ground and then some hydraulic thing stops you from dying. But, you know, towards the bottom there, your body screams, even if your mind isn't screaming, your body, because the gravity is like, you know, sucking you towards the earth. And the funny thing is that, you know, the anticipation of it was terrifying. It took me 4 months to actually do it. But then when I actually did it, it was like nothing was happening, you know, and I think a lot of changes like that, you know, like a lot of practices are like that. When you actually commit to doing something, often it doesn't seem like anything when you're doing it, in part because you have no reference point, you know. So if that's part of the question here, I think, you know, that there can be many, many different layers of practice like that.
So this is basically,
you know, kind of like,
yeah, sorry for interrupting, just go on.
No.
Okay, so
No, it's just like, I'm totally on the side of my brain. That's all I want to say.
Right, so this is basically stepping outside your comfort zone, right? So this somehow helps you feel the world in a different way, as far as I understand. Yeah.
Or maybe, you know, in a way, it's my uncomfort zone. You know, I've been very happy with being scared and hiding from this thing, and it's like, wow, really, I'm going to die, and I never did drop zone. You know, so let's just do it, and you know, see what happens. Well, and the fun thing about something shocking like that is that it really kind of, your mind falls open. Like, you know, you like spaghetti and you let go and the spaghetti goes bleh. My meditation teacher's like, you should go to the loudest possible club with the most pounding possible techno bass in it, or you should do that, you know, like the boat in the fairground thing, those kinds of things, right? Like what we call beauty versus the sublime. You know, the sublime, it's not really the opposite of beauty, it's the active ingredient of beauty. You have to think in order to have truth, right? Beauty is the feeling of true, the sublime is the feeling of thinking, actually. It's this kind of freedom, vertigo, rush, like, that when you first fall in love with someone, like before anything, that, something different happened. You know, that it's like a component of expanding the happiness. Could be that, kind of chemical.
All right, so thank you very much. I would still like to get back to this question of, I know, art or fiction or something that gives us a different perspective on things. So maybe anyone would like to comment on that.
I'm so sorry. I say tasteless thing. I was talking fairground because I have a temptation when people ask me about art, I want to talk about people like Phil Collins and Ariana Grande and fairground rides and stuff that seems very rude. To get him in as is laughing. You must never say Susudio is a great work of art in an art opening, don't you think? Everyone's holding the Prosecco, the one thing you should never say is, I love when Phil hired Earth, Wind and Fire to play for Genesis. That was the best bit.
Okay, good. So thanks. So yeah, Jūratė wanted to.
I just wanted to react when you were telling about the art, and this is kind of your experience. But then I remembered your great collaborations with Laurie Anderson or Björk. It feels like you are making art together with them, and you are elaborating or finding the new waves, how to explain your philosophy as well.
Right on. My theory is being right is seriously overrated. Changing how people feel about things and perceive things is better, right? It's called propaganda, right? Propaganda is a dirty word for art, and art is a really fancy word for propaganda. Or as I would say, William Blake, one of my very favorite artists of all time, and I'm writing a book now in the style of William Blake, about Blake, with Blake, and he calls it mental fight. Some people call it propaganda. I call it sometimes advanced psychic combat training. That's what studying art or making it really is. You're doing psychic combat.
I would just maybe like to use my right as a moderator and go back a little bit when you talked about Ariana Grande, saying talking about art and ecology and different ways of imagining the world and stuff like that. So I just wanted to ask a very simple question: how does Ariana Grande help us to think of the world we live in differently? Or maybe that wasn't your point, I'm just assuming.
Well, I don't know about thinking differently. To think differently, you have to have some kind of feeling different, Ideas are really like the foam on the ocean or the receipts that come out of the cash register. Ideas are from the past, right? And feelings are from the future, right? There's a continuum, right? Ideas are feelings, you know what they are, right? Like, why do you do therapy? Because you're having a feeling, you don't know what it is, right? So, of course, the feeling is a symptom of something that happened to you, but phenomenologically, it's from the future. It is the future, yeah. And so anything that allows you to have a feeling that you don't quite understand is... So when somebody sent me God is a Woman, I was amazed by it, and I thought that, I was amazed by the production. I tried very hard to get her, and also Frankie Goes to Hollywood. I wrote this opera about time with an avant-garde composer called Jennifer Walsh. And every week I would send the libretto, and I would include, Phil Collins, Ariana Grande, and Frankie Goes to Hollywood, disco music, just to see if she would include it. And she had to get rid of it because in her world, art should be a little bit like broccoli, like it's slightly nasty tasting, kind of, it's really good for you, but you shouldn't have any fun when you eat it. You should sort of hide. Whereas what I'm trying to do is hide the Phil Collins inside the broccoli, that was the game. But she always edited it out. So this time opera is super avant-garde, amazing. I had this argument with Björk, actually, thank you for asking this, because she was very critical of the 90s Björk, which she called the four to the floor stuff, the disco stuff. I think that's the best stuff. Sorry, Björk, but she wants to sound like the sound equivalent of Matthew Barney's sophisticated New York jerk, but instead, why not go back to the disco thing? It was much more powerful and much more sophisticated in a genuine way.
Right, so just one more question to elaborate. I was thinking about, so how does this feeling different or feeling something different help us maybe step outside our kind of anthropocentric understanding of things and somehow, I know, start thinking from a different perspective, from a more ecological perspective. So what's
feelings are alien beings, aren't they? In my view, like if a feeling is from the future, then a feeling isn't you in a way. So a feeling itself is a kind of non-human being. You know, if you allow yourself to be touched by something, you are, this feeling, this beauty is not in the object, it's a feeling, right? It's a state. Yeah, it's a phenomenon. It is as if it's over there, but really, who knows whose fault it is, right? Like, who knows? Was it your fault that I fell in love with you, or is it my fault that I fell in love with you? I can't decide anymore. Was it the Mona Lisa's fault, or is it my fault that I liked it, right? And so right there's this kind of uncertain kind of mind meld, even with something that might not be conscious. There's a feeling of equality, right? The Mona Lisa did it to me as much as I did it to the Mona Lisa. And so in that moment, the possibility that my concept of what it is, which is that it's an object, it's over there, it's not a person, it's just a painting, all that stuff is now irrelevant, because what's really happening is a kind of, I'm being caught in this tractor beam of the other thing, right? So the emotion is also a thing, right? And it's exerting this kind of gravitational field. And forever, Western philosophy, I'm getting this all from Immanuel Kant, right? And forever, there's been this secret conversation with Mesmer, you know, like he was obsessed with that guy, you know, like mesmerism, you know, like this animal magnetism. And his whole thing was, I'm not talking about being fascinated, that would be weird. And I'm not talking about being charmed, you know, but you can't really distinguish cleanly between loving something and finding it beautiful and being fascinated by it, right? And so kind of, if you take the anthropocentric stuff out of those sorts of theories, you very quickly arrive at an extremely non-anthropocentric way of thinking about art and beauty, because the art experience itself is a kind of alien being, right? Because it's not in your ego. There's no reason for you to be having this. So you have proof in your experience that you're not the only show in town, right? Like it's a sort of, the feeling of beauty is a concrete refutation of solipsism, right? Because there's at least one other thing in the universe that isn't you, aka the feeling.
Thank you. So would anyone like to add something?
You have mentioned the connections between the feeling of sublime and the cheerfulness, and I just thought, and also you have said that the sublime is a particle of beauty, and I wanted to ask, is it possible to think or conceive the idea of cheerfulness without beauty, strictly limiting ourselves with the sublime?
Oh, well, you know, I think it's more like cheerfulness and happiness are ethical, moral concerns, right? And beauty and the sublime are aesthetic. But you can have these feelings of happiness and cheerful because there are things called beauty and sublime, right? Like the reason why Kant is saying you can have what he calls synthetic judgments a priori because of this thing called judgment, which doesn't mean judging something. It means something's popped up inside you for no reason. That's what judgment means. And that's why you can be nice to people, because this thing just happens without you intending it to happen, and it's not a means to an end. And then you have proof that there is a world out there that isn't to do with your ego, and that you can treat things as ends and not just as means, right? And that's the thing we're talking about, right? We're talking about the aesthetic and therefore political basis for ethical actions and states, such as cheerfulness or happiness or whatever.
So I have a feeling that we have to come up with a different type of ontology, perhaps, ontology which gives up subjects and objects, and is based maybe on something we can call perception without agency or cognition without agency. And that could include, I don't know, feeling, movement, what else?
Yeah, yes, 100%. Yeah, the person to think about here is my friend Denis. You know, Denise Ferreira da Silva, who wrote this book called Towards a Global Idea of Race. And her argument in the book is that any subject-object duality is a master-slave duality. And what we're really talking about when it comes to racism, white supremacy, or indeed patriarchy is not whiteness or maleness in particular, but an idea of transparent, right? There are some kinds of beings in the world do not have a color or a flavor or a frequency. And this special being called the subject aligns with white guys mostly, most of the time. And we can maybe let some other beings be honorary white guys, or we can just destroy this idea, which is rubbish. And it doesn't accord with the physical world, because the physical world, everything has a very specific color and flavor. It's what quantum theory is really saying, that there's no transparent energy. There's like red energy and blue energy and green energy, right? Everything is very specific. And so the idea to drop is the idea that there is a transparent, universal anything.
Okay, thank you very much. That's an interesting insight. Any more remarks? Anyone? Nope. All right. So so Timothy, you use a lot of, well, okay, not really a lot, but sometimes you use this magical terminology. Like in your today's talk, you said that life is a miracle, and also you have a book published, Magic Realism, right? Magical realism. I'm not that sure about the title. I'm sorry. Magical or magic realism, either. So I just wanted to ask a very simple question. So what is so magical about realism? Like what is, I know, magical, miraculous ontology, or like whichever way you conceptualize it?
Lovely. So this is contemporary science and also my understanding of Buddhism kind of connected, right? So there's this guy called Roger Waters, who wrote a song called Breathe on an album called Dark Side of the Moon. And in the end of the first verse of that song, he says, all you touch and all you see is all your life will ever be. Because Roger Waters was the reincarnation of David Hume, who basically created in philosophy world contemporary science. And what did he do? He blew up cause and effect, right? He made it impossible to think that cause and effect is like a thing you can see underneath the data. When you look underneath the data, what you find is more data, right? The idea that there's a cause and an effect and you can point to it is a medieval tweet, which unfortunately people still retweeting, right? But science is saying everything you encounter is data, which just means stuff that has been given. And some of the stuff is in the form of measurements, and some of the stuff is in the form of not measurements like science measurements, but other measurements like, it reminds me of my grandmother, or it smells of stone that has rain on it, right? That's another kind of data. And a fact is actually an interpretation of data, right? So cause and effect can never truly be seen over there. They can only be inferred by looking at patterns in data, AKA by doing a kind of aesthetic appreciation of the patterns, because that's what art is, it's patterns, right? Science is the rigorous interpretation of correlated patterns in data, right? When I said this to a room full of engineers, you're being much more polite than when I was in Singapore a few years ago, and I said, basically, science is like really sophisticated, accurate music appreciation, and they just killed me for the rest of the conference. They just destroyed me after that, because they thought I was saying something really evil, because they're so into making things work, you know. But fundamentally, science is about making facts that are true in a sciencey way, right? Like you understand that there's a causal thing, and you write your little essay, and another group of scientists with a PhDs are going, yeah, that looks like a truth kind of a thing because it's pretty logical, and we'll publish it in Nature, right? But your idea is always an interpretation, and then also that's why science can change, right? Now, if you go to the Buddhism, you see something very similar. There's a philosopher called Nagarjuna who was operating about 500 BCE, and his basic point was, you can never see where the cause and it stops and the effect starts, right? You got a candle and the flame, and you can't see where the flame stops and the candle begins. Nevertheless, the flame is the flame and the candle is the candle. They're different, but you can't specify when where that thing is actually and where it's happening. And so the high-level explanation for our world is that it's like a magical display, right? Not an illusion. It's like genuine, actual magic, right? Someone went abracadabra and then something appeared like that. That's the high-level explanation, right? And the fact that we now know that facts are interpretations of data is what has led us to understand more about how weird our world is, right? That it's not mechanical, and that genuinely contingent random things can happen in it, you know. And this would be the same with the Buddhism. It's like genuinely new things can happen, like confused beings can become enlightened suddenly, and then they can get really confused again, and then they can become really enlightened again. And, you know, all of their confusion just pop for a second, you know. That's a new thing that happened. You wouldn't have been able to predict that from all of the ways they were messed up, you know. But nevertheless, that's a freely available, wonderful thing that can happen to you sometimes, you know, when an onion falls on your head.
All right, so unfortunately, we need to wrap our discussion up. So anyone has any final remarks? No? Timothy, would you like to add something? Okay. Can you just...
It works? I have a question to our Ukrainian speaker, and then Timothy's comment would be very welcome. So, dear Ukrainian friend, if you hear me, do you dream about rebuilding of Ukraine after the war? And when you will be more happy, if it will be rebuilt the same as it was before war, or to something different?
Honestly, I'm not sure if he's still online, so...
I'm online.
Okay,
I'm
great.
online, thank you. Thank you for a question. Well, you know, Ukraine is waiting for changes, but not only waiting, but stimulate the changes in our society from 2004, from the Orange Revolution, if you remember. And from in 2013, there was a revolution of dignity when Ukrainian people said that our choice is European values, justice, humanity, and how to explain? You know, sometimes I think that the picture of Europe that Ukrainians imagine in their mind is much better than European Union is. But we striving to this really high ideal, and yes, we are very disappointed of very real political behavior of some Western politics, and grateful from all of heart to Great Britain, to Lithuania, to Estonia, to Latvia, to Poland, and yes, we will change. The Ukraine after victory will be absolutely another than it was before war. I have to highlight that war started not at the end of February of 2022. It was started in 2014, but it was the hot part of the war. But the information war against not only Ukraine, but against all ex-Soviet Union countries. Sorry for this terminology, but it is fit for this situation. Was started at the 1st of January of 1996. So the information war lasts more than 25 years, and but Ukraine had done their choice, and this choice is first of all justice, human rights, and freedom, liberty. And we will fight for every building, for every street, for every village, because it is our land, it's our rights, and our idea of the happiness. Because happiness for Ukrainians is liberty, first of all, and another one, and the second one is independence. If you look into the classical folk pictures, which was on the walls of village homes, it will be the home, and near the home we have a garden and a little lake with goose and another water birds. Sometimes draw with a little boat with a fisherman. All this picture, it is about the independence of the one human family from the state. We want to be we want to be together, but we want to be the independent and decide what we want. Well, it's quite interesting because in one hand we are very capitalized one, because every Ukrainian thinking about how to produce, how to create. And in the other hand, we thinking about how to communicate in a not in a vertical but in a parallel. And all the things you see now and so from 2014. I mean the volunteer movement, when millions of people just connecting together to help our army, to help one to another, to help to refugees. It is about Ukrainian soul and Ukrainian breath. It's about anarchy in the one hand, and about the understanding of a state as a public, as a res publica, as a something that doing everyone. So democracy is part of our soul, deeply inside. And if you know, we have not a king in Ukraine after King Danilo. It was maybe the last, and after that we have a hetmans. Hetman, it's head of the army, and head of the state. He was elected, and after
Alex,
he was elected.
Alex, I'm sorry very much. We're running out of time. So maybe you could get to the point a little bit faster, please. Because
okay. So
just
well,
a couple of
okay, yes. Sorry, because I was very interested in Timothy speech and trying to
there is no need to explain.
Yeah,
just get straight to the.
It will be absolutely another. I can bet for anything, even for a box of the best whiskey. It will be absolutely another after the winning, and there are other very important points. If Russia become another after our win, if either Russia come to the story of Germany after World War I and thinking about revenge, or it changed it and become a normal, not totalitarian state. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Timothy, would you like to respond to that?
Oh, yes, one tiny thing. Ukraine is definitely from the future. We're talking about how things are from the future. I think that Ukraine is the future of many countries, not the war aspect, but Zelensky did the correct response to fascism, which is basically like the way things are, just automated even more and more with a kind of idiotic software running it. And, you know, I was waiting for someone to say this for years because of Trump, who of course is implicated in this whole thing, and the oppressiveness of living in a fascist dictatorship, you know, and he said, I don't need a ride, I need some ammo. And I was waiting for someone to say that for like 6 years, and I cried when he said that. That's the right level.
Yes, thank you very much. It's really sad that we have to end on this bittersweet note, but let's still hope for the better. So again, I would like to thank you, Professor Morton, very much. I would like to thank our participants very much. So let's give each other a nice round of applause.